My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God, my Savior. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God, my Savior. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God. My soul magnifies the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God, my Savior. My soul magnifies the Lord.
Gator's fairly close to Huntsville. This is my wife, Zilpah, and we're just down here visiting for a little while. And we're grateful we could come here and worship and study God's Word with you.
Glad to have you. What about you guys? Would you introduce your group? One of you?
This is Bob and Mary Wagner. They're from Dallas, Texas, and that's my grandparents. And this is my mom, Andrea, and my dad, Jody, my girlfriend, Kayla, and we're from Little Rock, Arkansas, and Kayla's from rural area north of here, Deacon Spring.
We're glad to have you here. All right, in the back. You didn't know you were going to be grilled this morning, did you?
My name is Brian Taylor. We are from Cookville, Tennessee.
Awesome.
No. It's lovely, very lovely. We're from Greenville area, South Carolina. Just visiting on vacation.
We're glad to have all of you here. Thank you for coming out, especially coming to Bible class. You encourage us by your presence. Did I miss anybody? I don't think so. The rest of you look somewhat familiar. We're in a series on shepherding. We're taking our outline from a book by Tommy South. He's the preacher for a church in Virginia. The book is called Shepherding the Flock of God, a practical guide to becoming and being an elder. We're in chapter 9. If you want a copy of this book, we have permission to give away electronic copies, PDFs. So if you'll see me or Glenn Barron, if he's here, we can get a copy of the book to you. So I invite you to get a copy if you're interested in this topic. So we've been talking about different things that have to do with shepherding. Today we're talking about decision making. There's a story in Acts chapter 15 we'll get to later that has to do with how the apostles and elders made a very important decision for the church. Let's see if I've got this going. So we're all familiar with decisions. We all have to make decisions, right? In our everyday lives, some are big, some are small. My daughter, Meredith, used to try to teach my grandson Nolan how to learn to make decisions. So when he was kindergarten, first grade, every night she would put out 2 outfits on the bed and she'd say, you choose. You choose what you want to wear tomorrow. And that went on for a while. And one day Nolan said, Mom, I'm too old for this. You just pick out my clothes. And the story is especially funny to me because now he's in active duty military and his clothes are picked out for him every day. Every day. My wife and I like to go out to lunch. That's kind of our big thing that we enjoy doing. But every day it's the same thing. Where do you want to go? I don't know. Where do you want to go? Where do you want to go? It's amazing how hard that is. Sometimes I just want to make up. Monday we're going here, Tuesday we're going here, Wednesday going here, but we haven't done that. If you travel north on US 331 from Funiac up through Opp and Brantley and Luverne toward Montgomery, you come to a little restaurant on the right-hand side, and the name of the restaurant is It Don't Matter. So if you think about that for a minute, it'll come to you. You know, you envision a wife saying, where do you want to go to lunch? And the husband saying, it don't matter. And that's where they go. And one more little story. I read a profile of a chief executive officer of a big company. I read it in a business magazine. So the reporter for the magazine shadowed the CEO for a full day and then later wrote the story. So at one point during the day, an aide came in with a piece of paper. He said, sir, here's 3 choices for a menu for our upcoming board meeting. You choose. And the Chief executive looked at the paper a second, handed it back, and said, "We'll go with menu number 1." The aide left, and the reporter said, "You didn't even look at that." He said, "I know. All his menus are good. It's not that important. It's not worth putting my mental energy in trying to decide." Later in the day, a call came in. There's a big problem at one of our plants. What should we do? And the CEO said, "How much time do I have to decide?" He was going to put a lot of effort into that. The point is, not every decision is the same. We're going to see that in a little bit in the life of Jesus. Not every decision is the same. Some are trivial, and some are super important. And when we're making decisions, that's probably the very first thing we need to decide. How important is this? How much priority should I give this decision? When I was in graduate school in engineering, they taught us that every decision, or most every decision, could be made scientifically with tools like this decision tree. I know it's too small for you to see, but it's some kind of mix of probabilities and cost and expected outcomes. And you put all that together in a tool like this, and you choose the optimal decision. And I'm not against this. Tools like this are good. I've used them, but we see a different kind of decision making in the Bible. And that's what we want to look at today. So I picked out 3, I call them case studies. 3 stories for us to look at, all from the New Testament. One from Titus, where Titus appoints elders. One from Luke, where Jesus selects apostles. And one from Acts chapter 15, where the apostles and elders get together to settle a dispute. The Bible teaches different things in different ways. You know, there are direct commands like repent and be baptized. But there are also stories that are there, I think, for our example. In fact, 1 Corinthians 10:6 talks about some things that happened in the Old Testament and said, now these things took place as examples for us. So I think there are lessons we can learn from these stories, from looking at the life of Jesus, looking at how the apostles did things, and that's what we want to do today. So the first one is Titus chapter 1. So Paul has written a letter to Titus with some instructions. Here's something I need you to do. And in verse 5 it says, "This is why I left you in Crete, so that you might put what remained into order and appoint elders in every town as I directed you." I think we pass over that pretty quickly and get down to the business about qualifications and all that. But I think this verse is worth thinking about. How did Titus do that? That was no small task. Crete is an island. It's 160 miles east to west. Covers 3,000 square miles. That's 3 times bigger than Okaloosa County. So that's probably Walton County, Okaloosa County, and Santa Rosa County put together. And Titus is walking. How does he do that? How does he get to every town, find the church in that town, and appoint elders for that church? How does he do that? Have you ever given that any thought? We're going to think about it today. So a whole series of questions here, and I want to talk about some of these, and I'll be glad to hear from you, your thoughts, your ideas. How did Titus decide whom to appoint? Did Titus identify candidates? Did Titus select from those candidates? I'm making a distinction, and this is just mine, so you don't find these words exactly in the Bible, but I think this is what had to have taken place. Somebody in each town had to identify candidates. Somebody had to select from those candidates. And then Titus appointed. That's what Paul told him to do. Titus appointed. But I think those steps maybe are different activities, and maybe different people were involved in that. How do you think? Anybody have an idea? How did that identification get done? How did the church identify those initial candidates? Probably the same way. Oh, okay.
Candidates, but the actual decision was made by God.
All right. So Tom suggested that it was like when that replacement apostle was selected. Maybe they came up with candidates and cast lots and said, let God decide. Okay. I hadn't even thought of that. And that may be what they did.
Paul preached. All the elders were not picked at that particular point in time. If it was just Paul going in and saying, well, you look good, and you look good, then he could have done it right then and there. He didn't have to go back with other people, having introduced the idea, having talked about Christianity, having preached what the requirements are. Then they go back, and essentially they're looking for, in my opinion, the people that are there to give them some candidates, and then Titus is going to go there and cinch it from the Holy Spirit.
All right, so Tom's suggesting that there was some teaching that went on. There were some lessons about elders and church organizations. I see you, Ronnie. And some time went past. And then perhaps the church was ready when Titus got there to say, hey, what have you guys come up with? Ronnie? Okay. So we've heard two ideas, a little bit overlapping, but not the same. So Tom went back to the time when an additional apostle was selected, and that involved somehow finding two candidates and casting lots. Ronnie suggested a model more like when the 7 men were chosen in Acts chapter 6 to take care of this problem with feeding widows. And basically, the church set forth some candidates. After having heard some qualifications, the apostles set forth, if you remember, some qualifications, and then 7 were chosen. Okay. In my mind, Titus could not have rolled into town and just said you, you, and you. I guess the Holy Spirit could have guided him to do that, but that's not what I would think happened. I think it's more like you guys have suggested, where there was some teaching about qualifications. There was a chance for the church to suggest some individuals, and I'm sure that Titus appointed, because that's what Paul directed him to do. But before that appointment, there had to have been some process for identification of candidates and selection from those candidates. And we don't know exactly how it was done. Paul told Titus to do it. We're confident he did it. But all the process that went on before, we're not exactly told. So we've already talked about what might have happened in Crete. Let's move forward in time to now and move to here. Here and now, what are some ways that identification might be accomplished? I've been a member here for 45 years and an elder for almost 30 of that. We've done it at least 3 different ways since I've been here. and I can step through that, but what are, and each way has some advantages and some disadvantages, some benefits and some risks. What are some ways? Yeah, we've done that. Steve's been here as long as I have, or longer. We've done that. We've just said, give us some names. So there's good about that. A good thing about that is it really casts a wide net, right? You might find an individual who may have been overlooked by some different process. That's a good thing about that approach. There's I think, some downsides to that approach. Sam said people are going to get hurt. Yeah, what happens is sometimes the people who are throwing names in a hat maybe haven't thought that through as well as they should. Maybe haven't talked to the individual that they want to appoint. Maybe the person doesn't even want to do it. Maybe there are all kinds of uncomfortable issues that you'd have to talk through, maybe about marriage, divorce, remarriage, uncomfortable conversations that person might not want to have. So you could, and then there's somebody's got to take the time to go through all of that. I see you, Brenda. So you may end up with some hurt feelings. You may end up with just uncomfortable conversations that maybe the person doesn't want to have, not ready to have. So it's not a perfect method. There's good about it. You get a wide net. There's some risk associated with it. Brenda? So Brenda said if she was going to suggest a person, she would go to him and say, "You desire this job." So that's good, Brenda. That's right and good, and I commend you. I'm just telling you, not everybody does that. I see you, Mike. Some people will say, "I really like that guy. I'm just going to put his name in," or "He's my second cousin. If he were an elder, I could get the color carpet I wanted." Mike? Okay, so Mike said through a process of time, a church tends to kind of know who are natural leaders, who do we look to, who do we call to come to our house when somebody's sick and pray for us. And I expect that happened in Creed, and it can happen today as well. The churches, first century churches, came out of a tradition. A lot of those people had been Jews worshiping in a synagogue, and they knew who kind of their elders were already. And it's likely that some of those same people became elders in the church. So one way we've done it, I just described, just let everybody throw a name in. We've done it where the elders suggested a person to the church and said to the church, "What about this person?" We've done it that way. And I think there's advantages and disadvantages to that. An advantage is you're likely to get somebody who is going to work well with the current elders. They've got a stake in it. They suggested him. A disadvantage might be you get kind of a groupthink where we just want somebody who's just like us, who thinks just like us. And maybe that's not ideal. Maybe you need somebody with some new ideas or fresh energy or whatever. So, but it's a way to do it. We've done it before. It's worked out fine, I think. But I'm just saying there's more than one way to do this. And there's some advantages and disadvantages to any way you pick. And the Bible doesn't direct us on how to do it. A kind of a hybrid way is to have a group. Maybe the elders ask a group of individuals, you go through and begin to talk to different people. Find out who's willing. Approach some people. Have those conversations in a more private way about qualifications and background and all of that. And then bring forth some names. That's another way. And we've done that before. I think Ross has served in that kind of capacity. I think Glenn has. So that's kind of a hybrid that maybe gets some of the benefits of both of those first two methods we talked about. How do we appoint elders? This ought to be an easy question because we've done this in the past, at least twice in the past couple of years. How do we appoint elders? So again, just bring them up right here and appoint them. But I'm suggesting that there's a lot that goes before that. There's identification of candidates. There's got to be a process for that. There's a selection process. Then typically what we do, I think, is, in my mind, exactly what they did in Crete. Ross comes up and says something, and we have a prayer, and we put hands on that person or persons. And then before that point, they were not elders, and after that point, they are. And we call that appointment. And I think the New Testament calls it appointment. I think we do it exactly like they did in the New Testament. Titus appointed, Ross appoints, but there's a lot that goes before that. Ross?
The church where my brother serves as an elder, they do similar to what we do, but they also give them a shepherd's staff. They actually get a staff to remind them of what they're doing. That's not obviously something you have to do, but I thought what a neat thing to take that home and have it as a reminder of who you are as you shepherd the flock of the church.
Okay, they have some symbolic thing that they do where they give, at a time of appointment, give the person a staff. Nobody gave us a staff, Sam. They were afraid you would hit somebody with it. But I like that. That's good. So those are some things to think about. Choosing elders for a church is a big decision. Did I miss somebody, Paul? Paul's pointing. Ronnie, say something else?
Yeah, since you're on this subject, the last elder we had appointed was David Rose. Okay? Now, we got some ex-elders in there as well. My question is, other than the fact that y'all took him up on the stage and laid hands on him, did y'all as a group pull him to the side and talk with him to let him know what his job would be, priority would be, or whatever he wanted to do? Did y'all do that? You know, because he's the newest one there, so when you're saying that, how y'all qualify him or how you take hands, I'm just asking.
David, you want to speak to that?
Several of the elders, not all of them, talked to me individually, and then Ross as well sat down and we talked about the position, responsibilities, and concerns I had. I felt comfortable with the amount of guidance, instruction, and questions they were asking me to think about that I hadn't thought about.
Oh, so that didn't scare you away.
We tried.
Okay, you answered my question. That's good.
Thank you, Ronnie. Thank you, David. All right, I'm headed for another story. Anybody have another question or comment on this? Clock is gone. Okay. Is that going to be a problem at sermon time? It's okay. I've got to watch, Rick. And I'm not worried about Ross. I was just kidding him. Let's go to another story that involves decision making. And this is in Luke chapter 6. And this is about Jesus. So some time has gone by. Jesus has been traveling around, preaching, teaching. And now, of all those people who were following him, disciples, I don't know how many there were. I don't know if it was, there's at least 12, I guess. I don't know if it was 20 or 50 or 400. But there were a group of people who were going around with Jesus, listening, to his teaching, wanting to follow him. And now Jesus says, I'm going to select 12. I'm not sure how he came up with the number 12. I suspect it's related to the idea that there were 12 tribes of Israel in that old kingdom. And now there's going to be 12 apostles in the new kingdom that Jesus would establish. And in these days, he, Jesus, went out to the mountain to pray. And all night, he continued in prayer to God. And when day came, he called his disciples, all of those people who had been following him, and chose from them 12, whom he named apostles. So did Jesus take this decision seriously? Absolutely he did. He spent all night in prayer. All night praying about this one decision. Jesus knew that however long, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years from then, he would be killed, he would be gone. And these apostles are going to have to carry on the work of his kingdom. So he took it very seriously. And how did he prepare? Sam's already said it. Well, the Bible tells us he spent all night in prayer. I'm guessing he did more than that as well. As he traveled with these disciples, all of that time, he's getting to know them. He's talking to them. Maybe God just said, pick this, this, and this. But I don't know. I tend to think about the human experience in these things. I wonder if Jesus was not traveling with these disciples, and as he was walking along the road, he would talk with them, and maybe in his mind he's thinking, Peter would be a good apostle. He's a natural leader. Yeah, he's a little impetuous. And yeah, that's something to think about. Right now I'm thinking on the positive side. So, I think Peter would be good. And I love the way Andrew relates to other people, and I love the way that he reaches out and meets people and talks with people. He would be a good apostle, I think. Was Jesus thinking thoughts like this? I don't know. But in my mind, I think maybe he was. And then, of course, before he made the decision, he took that to God. But I think that's a model for us. It's fine for us to think about what seems best to us. I want to do the best I can with the knowledge I have to make this decision. But before we make that decision, take it to God and say, God, give me wisdom, and I pray that this is the right decision. Did Jesus spend that much time on every decision? I say no. Maybe I'm reading too much into this, but there's a little story in Luke chapter 12. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Now, did Jesus say, wow, that's really important? I'm going to spend all night in prayer about that. And then I'm going to get back with you in the morning and give you an answer. Did Jesus do that? I see some head shaking now. I think he took about a second and said, this is not what I'm about. This is not a decision I want to make. Man who made me a judge or arbiter over you. So I think we can learn from Jesus about making decisions. Not every decision deserves the same amount of attention or effort. Jesus spent all night praying about the appointment of apostles. He spent 1 second deciding, I'm not getting involved in this. What else can we learn from Jesus about making decisions? Tom?
Making the decision here that you just talked about with Jesus. If someone were to come up to you and say, hey, I'd like to murder my wife, how much time did you have to think about that? It was totally illegal. It's totally against your beliefs. It's just totally So
Okay.
some decisions, if they are totally outside the word, totally outside what we're supposed to be for, that doesn't need to be a law.
Okay. I think what Tom is saying, to try to reword it a little bit, is if we're so well grounded in the principles of the Bible and God's Word that we shouldn't have to think very long about so many things. Because we've built up that foundation of faith and knowledge that we can know immediately. No, I don't want to do that. That's not right. So many other decisions, it's not obvious, what's right and what's wrong. And most of you have gone through something like that. I know that I have. Should I move to this new city and take this new job, or should I stay where I am? I've been through that. I can remember walking my neighborhood in Pensacola thinking, should I take this job that I've been offered at Eglin Air Force Base and have to move to Fort Walton? And Janet loves where she is right now. And those are hard. Those are hard decisions. So you've got to think as best you can about what would be best for me, what would be best for my family, what would be best for God's kingdom. And then pray. God, give me wisdom, and God, make this work for the good of your kingdom, for the good of my family, for my good as well. I know most of you have been through something like that.
Question, Jesus said, "Man, who made me a judge or arbitrator over you?" The individual could have said, "Well, sir, you did." Jesus would say, "If I did, what did I teach you about sharing with your brother and your relationship with your brother?" Sometimes I think the answer to a question is sort of like the opposite of what was my first thing. Is there something in the looking at it from a different direction, trying for another truth?
Okay.
In our hearts sometimes. Kind of always think about, okay, what about the other side? What would be the plus side to it?
Yeah, so Bill's suggesting that there have been times when Jesus said, "You call me your teacher," and that's right, I am. So the man said, "Hey, you're my teacher. You should tell me what to do." And Bill suggests Jesus might have said, "I've already taught you. I've already taught you what you need to know to make this decision." Wade?
Another example too, like we're at the next evolution of how Jesus shows us how to be better. Because, as we looked at previously, where Moses was, sitting there trying to try to judge everything himself, gets told, "Hey, go and appoint, others to go help you with this task to go do the thing." And this is the next piece of it, where it's like Jesus moves beyond that and says, "Hey, instead of having someone else figure it out for you, how about you go try it?" And Bill's point, like, the answer is in the question with, before you go ask someone about this, like, what did I already know?
Okay. How can I put that concisely? What Wade said. Sometimes we just need to think through what we already know. And Brian?
Well, about you're talking about the size of the decision of it and how it affects other people, right? So you were talking about moving from Pensacola to Eglin for work. That was a decision that was big enough that you pulled in Janet into that discussion, right? And so many times we have decisions that are things that we can make individually, but corporately, you pull in additional wisdom and insight and understanding. So when we look at even the eldership today, there are certain things that we will, hey, I took care of this, this is what I decided, we went ahead and moved this forward, versus trying to pull together the collective just based on, how important the decision is and how impactful that is.
So it's good to get the advice of other people. I'm going to confess before you go talk to Janet, I didn't bring her into that as much as I should have. I was young and stupid. In those days, here's how I was. I was often wrong, but never in doubt. And maybe I'm still that way. Did I miss somebody? Tom? Make it concise, Tom.
Decisions. Just like Brian was talking about here. We all make errors. It's a learning process of being an elder and being a deacon. I mean, you're handed a brand new job, and it will take some time to get to know what you're doing and how to handle the job, how to get along with all the rest of the people within the hierarchy there. And the same thing goes with eldership too. And just like you said, I know I've made some terrible mistakes in my Christianity coming up. I've corrected them since, especially in teaching, in the form of teaching, but we're all not perfect.
Yeah, so one of the lessons Tom said we're going to make mistakes. And one of the lessons of the Bible, I've got this on a chart coming up. I don't think we'll get to it, but the idea is forget those things that are behind and just look forward to what's ahead. We are going to make mistakes. Ask God for forgiveness. Ask others for forgiveness if that's what's needed. But we are going to make mistakes. But to the best of our ability, forgetting what's behind, looking forward to what's ahead is what we need to do. We've got just a few minutes. Let's look briefly at one more. This is Acts chapter 15, and the background for this is Paul and Barnabas have made the first missionary journey, Acts chapters 13 and 14. They came back to Antioch to report on the trip. Some men from Jerusalem came up and said, hey, we've got to teach these Gentile converts to obey the old law, to be circumcised, to obey the law. And that led to a dispute. So now Paul and Barnabas are going to go to Jerusalem. And when they came to Jerusalem, they were welcomed by the church and the apostles and the elders. It's interesting that the early church had concurrently apostles and elders in that early church. And they declared all that God had done with them on that first missionary journey. But some believers who belonged to the party of the Pharisees rose up and said, it is necessary to circumcise them and to order them to keep the law of Moses. And the apostles and the elders were gathered to consider this matter. So is this a big decision or small? This is huge. This is huge. And so let's look at what happened. So we've already talked about the setting, the location, the time. We're in Jerusalem following that first missionary journey. Why do you think the apostles didn't just say, here's how it is? We're apostles. Jesus appointed us. We've got the authority. Here's how it is. I think they wanted buy-in. Did somebody raise a hand back here? I think they wanted buy-in on the decision. They were willing to, kind of in my mind, I think they knew which way this needed to go. But in any case, they wanted to give everyone a chance to have his say. They did listen. So the Bible indicates that a lot of people got up and talked and gave their opinion. It was James, one of the elders, who was a Jew, who might have been expected to take the other side, but he got up and took Paul and Barnabas' side on this. Do you think there was a danger of the church splitting into two groups, Gentiles and Jews? I think there was Doug's nodding his head. I think there was a huge danger of that. That could have been the easy way out. This is too hard. We're just going to split into two churches, and that would have been a tragedy. Make it concise, Tom.
By the Jewish people wanting to do just that, split the church
Okay.
up.
Tom says some of those Pharisees were spies. I think some were Christians. The Bible tells us, I forget the verse, that many priests obeyed the gospel. But they didn't. Thankfully, they didn't split into two groups. And there's a lesson for us. You know, if we have tough problems, don't take the easy way out and say, let's just split. You know, let's see if we can work this out. I know there's a tension between purity and unity. Often those things are in conflict. We feel like we need to stay pure by doing or not doing whatever. We feel like we need to be unified because Jesus told us to be unified. And there's tension between those two ideas. But this group found a way to go forward. The conclusion of the discussion, you might say, was a tiny bit of compromise, but basically said we're not going to require these converts to be circumcised. We're not going to require them to obey the law. We couldn't obey it. We're not going to require them to obey it. We're willing to say refrain from immorality, refrain from worshiping idols or whatever. You can call that a compromise if you want. But those were principles that fit well in the New Kingdom as well. Was the matter settled for all time? No, it was not settled for all time. Read the book of Galatians. Read the second half of the book of Romans. Paul deals with this again. So it wasn't settled for all time, but it was settled for that point in time. I think we're going to stop here. I've got a few more slides and just some other considerations. I'm going to end in an odd way. I'm going to end by reading you a poem that I like. So I like poetry, and I like this one because it talks about making a decision. So if you'll permit me, I'm going to just read this and then we'll be dismissed. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth, then took the other as just as fair and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that, the passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning, I'm not doing this where you can read it. And both that morning equally lay, in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh somewhere, ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. That's by Robert Frost. I appreciate your attention today, and we are dismissed.